and disintegrate. Years roll along and fade. Don't let them slip away. Right here, right now, today. These are the good old days. Right here, right now, today. Hey, these are the good old days.
All right, well, welcome to Go Figure, and today we're going to do something again a little bit different and hopefully a little bit festive. It's the holiday season, and we have a friend of the channel, Scott Neitlich, back with us today, and we're going to just talk Christmas toys, but specifically catalogs, Christmas catalogs from the 80s when we were growing up, and just the tradition that has almost become. Nobody said, okay, on November 18th, we're going to go home and look at the Christmas catalog. It wasn't a collective choice to do, but it was an experience that almost every kid from the 80s shares. And if you mention the Wish Book, well, I don't know what your catalog was in the States, or you go up in Canada, it was the Sears Wish Book was our go-to, Christmas catalog. And
I used to, because my birthday is in November. So we would come early November before. I used to purposefully leave it out on the table for what I want. I love the Sears. Obviously that covered everything from shoes to toys, but I have, oh my God, so many memories of the Sears catalog. I loved it. I wish I kept some of them.
It's great. Actually, I was looking them up, and they go for big money. Like there's a collector out.
I bet they do. Honestly, yeah, I could see that. Because nowadays, that's what I was actually grabbing. This is what we get. This is the Target catalog in the U.S. and this is the Amazon one. And I actually have a video about modern toy catalogs coming out, I think on the 18th in about a week. So
what started this whole narrative in my head was, so we're in Canada, so we still have Toys R Us.
Lucky.
Yeah, I know. You got to come for a visit. We'll go Toys R Us shopping together.
Oh my God, I would just to walk into a Toys R Us again would be so much happiness.
Yeah, actually, I did a FaceTime call with my mom at her Toys R Us. She's shopping for the kids, and so she's FaceTiming me around the store. So I was virtual shopping with my mom. It was incredible.
God, I miss Toys R Us.
But we have a Toys R Us strictly toy catalog, and it was about the same size as your Target catalog. And so my kids were looking through it, and it took about 3 minutes to scroll through the whole thing. And I think there was 3 or 4 action figure lines represented in the catalog. It wasn't. And this is Toys R Us, right? It wasn't super deep, and a lot of it is the grab me toy of the year, which is I think a newer thing that's come along, where it's not attached to any line. It's just whatever the toy of the year happens to be. I think last year it was the Pixie Flyer, and this year it's some kind of magic cauldron that everybody's going for. So I said to my kids, I was when I was a child, the catalog was like a phone book, and it had everything in it, and it was, and like you said, leaving it out when relatives came over on the coffee table, just in hopes that they'd spy what you were looking for. Right, was a thing that I think it was a collective thing we all did without talking about it. And my sister had a red marker and I had a blue marker, so we'd circle the things that we wanted in our respective colors, and then you leave it around so people understand. But I also think that the catalog, for me, it was the promise of availability. And so in Canada, we got toys a different timeline than the States was rolled out. But lots of our programming was, States based. So our commercials we were getting sometimes for toys that we never saw on our shelves. So as a kid, I never saw a Silverhawks action figure in real life. I never actually saw them. But we saw commercials for them, and I was like, those look really cool. But when we got the Wish Book, it was this is a portal to actually getting it. You can actually order it. It's a promise that it exists in our world.
It's somewhere in the ether.
Yeah, right. I have access to it. But it was like a ritual, just kind of going through it. And so I brought up online some of the Wish Books to show them. And my son said to me, in a very serious, he's an old soul, in a very serious and somber tone, he's like, Dad, why are there this many cool toys now? Where'd they all go?
I'm writing that one down. That's a good topic. Where are all cool toys. That's a great quote, like from a child.
right?
I mean, I actually have a kind of an answer to that from like a semi-professional stand that
Yep.
most studios, and sorry, just finishing off, I had to write notes. Most studios are kind of like, and toy companies, or just general IP producers, right? I mean, comics, movies, toys, I consider toys storytelling too.
Absolutely.
And they're terrified to make something new because the failure rate in toys is actually huge. We don't realize that because, modern Star Wars toys, have been going for 30 years now, since your Power of the Force figures back there behind you. I can see Carbonite Han and buffed up Soloplex Luke.
I love buffed up Soloplex Luke.
Is that the one with the long lightsaber or the short lightsaber?
It's a square card long lightsaber, so it's
damn girlfriend.
Right, it's the rarest of the non-rare figures.
Nice. Most Power of the Force stuff is like not worth the paper it's printed on now, but that's not important right now. The point is, I still need to buy that tan Jedi Luke. It's like been on my list. It only goes for like $20 now. I remember when it went for like, 200.
Yeah.
Off topic. So, a lot of studios and toy companies and IP owners, because there's such a high failure rate, and most toy lines go maybe a year or two, that max. Something like Star Wars going that long at retail is bell curve, outlier. So it's much easier to bet on, He-Man 7.0 or Star Wars 12.0 than it is to create the new Silverhawks, because the like Jax specific created a kind of Bakugan type line, like a pop out, some collect and pop out kind of feature. Gosh, I can't remember the name off the top of my head. I could Google it quickly, but I'm not going to. But it failed, and they got stuck with like a warehouse full of inventory, and that's really expensive to both sell off, store, deal with. And I remember when I was there, I worked for Jax for a while. It was like the policy was like, okay, we're only licensing now. Like we're not creating new IP. That was our one. We did that. It blew up in our face. We're done forever. And that's you could take that and then extrapolate to other companies, and even, it's like, you go to the movie theater right now, and what do you have? Matrix, Ghostbusters. It's like insane. It's like so that's basically a big reason why, is because it's become, back in the 80s, it wasn't this giant machine of coordinated digital streaming product, retail events. And, back then it was just like, hey, here's a barbarian character, and we're going to include mini comics, right, Bob? Yeah, sure, Roger, mini comics. That's like literally was the conversation. Exactly.
I like to liken it sometimes in my mind when you're talking about the new IPs and the licensing and like the safe bets. I remember when I was, as a kid, I was a big wrestling fan, and still am. It's a nostalgic thing. But when UFC started coming out, the Ultimate Fighting Octagon Challenge, those first few events were so bananas, because it would be like a sumo wrestler against a boxer, and he's going to wear one glove, and they're going to fight and see what happens. And it was just kind of mayhem. But then as that sport has kind of progressed, it's really become this like mixed martial arts, like refined thing. But there's no magic in it anymore. Like there's no wow moment, because it's so cookie cutter, because the science is so refined. I find spreadsheeted is what I tend to say. Right. And so, yes, we know that Masters of the Universe is going to, have a fan base of some sort. We know that G.I. Joe is going to have a fan base of some sort. We know that wrestling is going to get there. We know that Star Wars and Marvel and DC are all going to be kind of evergreen properties. But they all started with just trying an idea. And I think we're missing out on like the new hit, because people are very scared to try, like you said, to try something new. There is hits out there that just haven't, been attempted yet. And, another antidote I could throw to this conversation is when I was at Mattel, just a casual conversation I had with one of the higher ups, a director or VP, told me that in, I guess, like the early mid 90s, this is well before I didn't join Mattel until 2005, there was basically an active conversation, direction, choice to not create any more
like, He-Mans, etc. And the rationale was they actually said everything that's been created has been. There's no room for anything else. And then Ben 10 came along and
Right.
proved them wrong. And then they're like, oh, we need to rethink that directive. But it was interesting. I mean, this was just a casual conversation I had with someone about a casual conversation.
Yeah.
So, take it for that. But it was really interesting to hear that they were like, yeah, like we realize that there's no room at the market for the next Thundercats or Transformers or Strawberry Shortcake or whatever. We need to focus on other things and creating new concept. And then again, Ben 10 came along and kicked ass.
Well, my son was at the perfect Ben 10 age. And
Yeah,
Ben 10 was this crazy thing where like, make any design you want, we'll work it in. Like we'll just make alien after alien after alien.
Yeah. And it had very toyetic aspirational qualities with the watch and being able to like instantly transform into the monsters.
Yeah.
Spoke to kids. It's like there's room. I mean, you just have to put on your, but it's expensive now.
Yeah.
Because like back then it was just like, oh, here's a toy and we're going to throw a mini comic in there. Now it's like, okay, this is a coordinated multi-billion-dollar event between movie and studio and stores and the Marshmallow Man or whatever.
Right. And there's branding and there's the whole kit and caboodle comes with it. It's not like you say, it's no longer are they toy makers as they are brand, advertising.
Yeah. I mean, and that's why toys are at retail too. Like this is also an interesting point that some of the other fan sites earlier this year, like that I was in debates with and stuff, would mention things about how big box retail shouldn't be allowed to sell toys anymore because they're not catering enough to the adult collector. And they've proven, like their inability to have things in stock or whatever. Toy companies need to stop working with them. And I'm like, that's actually insane. Because one, they're the ones who provide the orders to justify the production. Right. Because you can't go into production without a very large order. You need a Walmart, a Toys R Us, a Target, a Meijer, etc.
Yeah.
Honestly, like when I work for toy companies as opposed to myself now, if you didn't get like 2 out of the 3 big ones, then you didn't go into production, and you had to call the other guy and say, "I'm sorry, we don't have enough orders. We're canceling this line."
Right.
So it's not just that, like, and the idea that Amazon and Entertainment Earth and Big Bad Toy Store, these guys can all, like, I've made a video about this on my channel, Spector Creative. There's my plug. Could come together like Voltron and create like a super online collector toy store. I work for Entertainment Earth, so I know this part of the business too, and like they do a fraction. I mean, Walmart's ordering capability is like, it's like Zeus versus like some guy, a peasant, like making, chipping away at a rock, like, down on Earth. Like, it's just, I mean, I'm not saying they're all powerful, but their volume, the number, they have like 6,000 doors. That's what the industry calls doors.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And so then the other reason for big box retail carrying product is exactly what you just said. It's an advertisement for the product. So when you have, Eternals action figures hanging at an end cap at Target, it's not always about selling Eternals action figures. It's about reminding moms, dads, kids, whoever, that, oh, there's an Eternals movie out now.
Yeah.
And like to see people kind of miss this point, and that's part of what I try to do on my channel, is in a positive way explain the why.
Yeah.
It's not just like, oh, I can't find this toy at Target, so Target should no longer be allowed to carry these toys. Like, no, that's.
I think too, it's funny, not to get too much into it, but the idea that the adult collectors are this buying force, when toys are a kid thing, and as a guy who has kids and I work with kids, I'm like, we need to, like, kids are buying toys. They're the ones who are in the stores looking and seeing, and I remember the first time I saw like He-Man, I was in the store. That's my first exposure to it. Was like, oh, what is this? I don't know. I just want it. And then I saw a similar thing happen in 2006. I don't know if you remember, but when Superman Returns came out, Toys R Us got a Jor-El and Superman 2-pack.
Oh, I not only remember that, but I've got a great story behind that. But
Okay,
continue.
so
it was right when I came to Mattel, and I didn't work on it, but I worked on the aftermath.
okay, so when I saw that was coming out, I was like, whoever at Mattel thought this up had me in mind, because I'm like, this is the first like Marlon Brando Jor-El action figure that's ever been made. So,
Yes,
yes, well, nothing Brando's cheap. So I got the 2-pack and I bought the translucent single carded one. But I was in store, like, you know, doing the adult collector thing where you're like walking quickly to the aisle, not running, but you're not taking your time to get there. And then there was a young guy who was like 6, and he picked up, they had a bunch of them, and he picked up the same 2-pack, and his mom's like, is that what you want? And he goes, yeah. And she goes, well, who's the other guy? He goes, I don't know, old Superman? I don't know. And this kid just bought it because he thought it looked cool, and because toys are cool to kids.
and that's why they have jetpacks, and Batman comes in every color of the rainbow. You know, it's really funny you're mentioning this, because like, so I've done a lot of podcasts. Actually, you're my third one in 3 days. Weirdly, I like don't do any for 4 months, and then I do 3 in a row. And it's just such an honor. I really appreciate you having me on, because
I love that you're back on the show. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's just so much fun to talk toys. That right there is like the crux of everything. Because, and like this was something asked to me by one or two of the other podcasts in the past 2 days, where you know, they said like, are kids really buying toys? And yeah, it's like we're so emotionally connected to the stuff, right? Yeah. That, I mean, like, come on out without knocking over everything. You know, here is my Walrus Man from when I was a kid, like my Walrus Man. You know, when I bought at a flea market, this is the one I played with. And, you know, or, you know, the Scare Glow, right? You know, this is Origins, you know.
Yeah.
Right? So I bought this because I loved Scare Glow. Actually, a friend found this for me, because I've never seen him at retail. But you know, not only are we emotionally connected to the product, but we're also like so invested in the process. You know, we go to the toy aisle weekly, daily, hourly.
Yeah.
I have a Marvel Legends Human Torch coming from Hasbro, the unflamed version of Johnny Storm. That's an exclusive to Hasbro Pulse. Yeah, I said Hasbro Pulse. And I've been like tracking it on the UPS app, like, you know, every day to see where it is. And actually I got an alert right before we jumped on. It's been delivered. It's probably sitting on my doorstep right now, and I'm like itching to go grab it. So it's like that overrides the sense of logic, because since we're so invested and we spend so much time tracking our toys and finding our toys and you go checking Amazon, checking eBay, that it overrides the concept that we couldn't possibly be the smallest consumer group, you know.
Right.
And even within the toy industry, action figures, you know, the toddler toys, preschool toys, outdoor toys. Action figures is like way, way down. It's below dolls, it's below games, it's below vehicles. I mean, it's not the lowest.
Right.
The lowest is probably Chia Pets, but it's not the highest. It's like it's below par, it's below medium. It's like in the second half, if you will. So it's like now we're talking a very lower selling category and a lower demographic within that. So it's like Russian dolls, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like I can say this on my channel till I'm blue in the face, and I have. And it amazes me how many people just, you know, it's like the cognitive different, you know, refusing to believe it.
Yeah.
You know, right when, I mean, so this is like a sneak preview of what I'm going to be talking about on my channel about these catalogs. But if you flip through these modern catalogs, where's the collector product?
No.
There's none. There's like one Funko. Like, if collector product sold, it would be in the retail aisle. You know, like they put it there, not behind electronics. Like, I don't know if they do that in Canada, but here in the US, yeah. You've seen that section in Target behind the electronics aisle. It started off as 20 feet. Now it's 5 feet. Like, it's shrinking because it doesn't sell. Like, collectors adults are not enough to keep this line at retail, which is why I kept saying on my channel over and over again, kids need to get into this. Kids need to look up and say, ooh, cool, ghost with a purple cape. Like you said, you know, that's awesome. Buy that for me. Not, I'm really into Motu because kids have no idea. Hopefully the new cartoon, at least the CGI one, introduces them to it. But and 2000X, the He-Man line, proved that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there weren't like collectors were like, this is the coolest thing ever. They bought the She-Ra and the Keldor.
And the 2000X show, it was so good.
So good.
Right. And to this day, when my kids come home from school, our tradition now is they're like 2000X, and so we watch an episode of 2000X after school together because they love it. But I think I remember I had just gotten married when that came out, and we had our own first little apartment, and then Saturday morning cartoons was never a thing my wife did as a kid. She was always working the butcher shop, getting things done, and so I was like, no, we're doing Saturday morning cartoons, and 2000X came on. I watched the first like 4 episodes on Saturday mornings, and then it was like Wednesday afternoons or something. Like it just kept moving around, and could never find it.
Horrible. Yeah, and then 6 a.m. on weekdays. Yeah,
Yep.
It never found its audience. The case packs were terrible, and I mean, it wasn't one factor, but yeah, it crashed it. But the biggest thing was kids walking down the toy aisle didn't look up and say, "Oh, Superman and old Superman."
Right.
Like what you just said. That is like quintessential right there. So okay, let me tell you about that Jor-El pack before we like.
Yeah.
So right when I came into so I started at Mattel and Hot Wheels. I was in Hot Wheels about 2 years, and when I transferred over to the marketing action figure group through my pitch for Maddie Collector, and I was like there to kind of get the ball rolling on that for 90 days. The person I was working under was Jim Murphy.
Okay.
And so he had worked on the Superman Returns toy line. So that toy was his baby. I mean, there were designers too, but he was the marketing guy for it.
Yeah.
And he asked me, I mean, it's like, I vividly remember this because I sat right behind him. He was basically I reported to him for the first like year and a half, 2 years in marketing. Very great guy, ex-military, like awesome guy. He was in the Marines. Spins around his chair and says, "Scott, I gotta ask you a question. You're a collector, like a legitimate collector, right?" And that's the other thing that's like, I think eye-opening is that like most people who work at toy companies or any manufacturing company see no difference between this and, a pen.
Right.
It's a product to ship. Like, how many units do you need? Not like, oh my God, it's Potent Baba, and I love him. I mean, there are people like that. Your David Vonners, your Bobby Vallas, your Bill Beneke's, but it's far and few between. So Jim spins around his chair and talks to me, and he says, "You're legitimately a collector, right?" Which people like made fun of me for. They're like, "Oh my God, Scott actually collects toys." Like here I am working at a toy company, and people think like it's like so geeky. Like when they realized I was like legitimately buying toys for myself, a lot of my coworkers thought like I was the biggest like schmuck, like nerd.
So I used one of your anecdotes at a leadership meeting.
Oh yeah.
That I was running the other day. I was talking about like buy into the ministry, and here's what we're doing. Here's where our goals are. And I said, there's, a friend of mine was working in toy companies, and he went into an interview with an action figure in his pocket to get a job making action figures, and he didn't get the job because he had one in his pocket. They thought that was weird, and I was like, that just shows to me buy-in. And so I want to see buy-in from my team.
Oh yeah, I'll never forget that interview. Anyway, so Jim says to me like, you legitimately collect toys. You consider yourself a collector. I'm like, hell's yeah, I consider myself a collector. Like I proudly wear that on my shirt.
Yeah.
I mean, look at my shirt. And he says, I spent the last 2 years working on Superman Returns, and a huge part of that was negotiating with the Marlon Brando estate to get a Marlon Brando figure in the line. Yeah. And we paid like a ridiculous amount of money, the logistics, like more work went into this one pack than almost the whole line, if you will, like a band with work hours. And he said, and it sold like spit. I don't want to curse on your channel.
There you go.
I don't know if I can. It sold terribly. Like, can I ask just your opinion? Like, why did this not sell?
Yeah.
I turned to him like, well, it was the wrong size. And he's like, what are you talking about? It was the wrong size. It was perfectly in scale with Superman. Like, they're both the wrong size. They're 5 inches. What am I supposed to do with a 5-inch Marlon Brando Jor-El figure when everything I own is 6-inch?
Right.
And he looks at me like, are you effing kidding me? That is why it didn't sell. So he's like, so if I made that figure, that whole line 6-inch, it would have sold. It's like, yeah. I don't know why it didn't.
Well, and because DC Superheroes was out at the time, right? The predecessor to the DCU Classics.
Yep.
So that was out at the time, and I remember they released the S3 sculpt, like the Super Sculpt Superman, where he had like bullets bouncing off his chest.
Oh, that one too. Yeah, yeah.
But it was just a statue.
Yeah.
Like, well, this is the right scale, but it doesn't move. It is just like a weird statue.
And that right there is the difference between having someone who's a consumer, a collector of the product, working on it, like, and then look, okay, so I came along on DCU Classics.
Right.
Like I was there basically right in that transition period. And it was actually part of the reason I was able to stay in the marketing group, because Matty Collector wasn't a job, but running the DCU Classics line was.
Right.
And when I moved over to run Matty, they also were like, they saw me like reading comic books on my break or whatever. And they're like, wait, like you actually know about this stuff? Like, you know who these characters are? I'm like, well, yeah. Like, do you think you could run the line or help with it? I was like, I would love to do that. So Jim was the brand manager for the first year, but I was kind of like his assistant. And then in the second year, I took over in full. I was then like dubbed a full Avenger.
Right.
And
that line ran deep.
And it's because the Horseman, Bill Beneke, the designer, and myself were huge fans and worked together to make sure Commandy happened, or Booster Gold had the right look, or
right.
Whatever. And if you look at it like that, that's a perfect example. The year before that, when it was just standard MBA, I mean, I'm getting my MBA myself, so I'm not knocking MBAs, but people who weren't, you had your unarticulated statue at the right size, and you had your articulated action figures at the wrong size. So it's like right there is the disconnect. And so when I told him that, like his face was just like, "Are you kidding me? All I had to do was make this 1 inch bigger. That's why it because they put so much work into this one toy.
And those toys looked great.
Yeah, but they didn't work for collectors.
Didn't work for
collectors. In a big way, because if they were 6 inches in scale, a lot more collectors would have got them.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because the other half of that story, and I think I already did a video about this on my channel. It's hard to remember because I work 30 days in advance. So like videos I record today don't go live till January. Today's December 11th. It's my 16th anniversary with my wife, our first date. Better buy her flowers.
Adorable.
So I mentioned to Jim like it had to be bigger, and somehow that it's like Purple Monkey dishwasher. It got passed through, but lost quite some of the meaning. And that's why the Dark Knight figures were bigger, but they weren't quite 6 inch, because I didn't use the word it needs to be 6 inch scale. I said bigger. So they upped them to like 5.5. Like, I mean, it's like not quite 6 inch, but like sometimes half an inch you can play with a little bit and they'll work on shelf. Yeah. And that is why all of the Mattel like movie lines, even the Ghostbusters line that was on Matty, were not quite 6 inch, because they wanted everything at least to like work with that dark, because otherwise the Dark Knight line would have been a weird outlier too. So right. Just, okay, all movie lines are now going to be this scale. And I was like, well, it should still be a little bigger, but okay.
So it's funny because I collect mostly vintage, but I do have a bunch of DCUC and a lot of those movie masters that came out, with like Man of Steel, Dark Knight, Green Lantern. I was in, and I had to put them on a different shelf because next to the other 6 inch figures, so I have a whole movie masters shelf. So I'm like, this is the only way I can, like, my OCD can handle it.
No, and what you're saying, and that right there is like, hold on, I have to make one note. I'm making notes for future videos.
Beautiful.
Shelf plus scale. These are great. Yeah, it's like if you're going to dedicate a shelf. I mean, I'm looking behind you. I mean, every one of your shelves is filled. Every one of, all of my shelves are like ridiculously filled. There's no room. Right. So if I'm going to give you a shelf, Mr. Toy Company, you need to promise me the product is going to be in the right scale and you're going to complete the line. Don't give me 4 Thundercats and bail. Like, we're either all in this together or like, let's walk away.
Yeah. It's interesting too what you were saying earlier, that it's a lot of the process that we love, even more than the product sometimes, because when Revelations was coming out, and then the new Masters CGI show was coming out, collectors on all the collector groups that I'm part of were like, this CGI line's garbage. It looks like, what is this? This isn't my Masters of the Universe. But those same guys, like 2 months later, like, I picked up this figure and I picked up this figure and I got this one, and they're buying the line just because they want to buy something, right? They want to go to the store, they want to look in the toy aisle, and they want to take something home.
And all those toy runs, it's like after a while it gets to the point that like you're like, oh my God, I'll just buy anything.
Right.
Like, to justify the gas and the hours. There was like this, well, I mean, this was sort of one of them. I was one of the targets by a coffee shop I frequent. The Hot Wheels aisle actually faces, it's like one side of the action figure aisle, some of the targets. And so it sort of forces you to look at the Hot Wheels.
Right.
And so I saw this, which I mean, it's the Blackbird.
Right.
And 99 cent, basic Hot Wheel. And I looked at it and I'm like, wow, is that like a stealth, bomber? That looks really close to the X-Men Blackbird. I bet I could buy that and like feel like it's close enough. I don't buy Hot Wheels. I'm just not a Hot Wheels guy.
No, me either.
For 2 years. And then I look at it in the packaging. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. That is that's the X-Men Blackbird. Like, it really is. For 99 cents, like, awesome ship.
Yeah.
And like, I was like, that, and I just found, this is one of those rare things that I just found on a toy run. I didn't even know this existed.
Right. So just hold on just hold on 1 second.
You're getting yours. Or what are you bringing out? Something cool.
I got my X-Jet last night.
Really? Same one? That's crazy. See how this stuff works?
I was out shopping last night and saw this.
Yeah. There you go. Bam.
Right? And I was like, that for 99 cents, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen.
And it made me feel so good about the toy because I didn't find anything else. I hadn't found anything in like a few weeks.
Right.
But 1.99 X-Jet made me feel like I actually haven't seen it since. I always like, now I keep an eye out because I wasn't even aware they're doing this whole line of movie vehicles. And apparently there's a hoverboard, but it goes for like $300 online. So
it was funny because that when Mattel released those vintage Masters of the Universe Hot Wheel vehicles.
Yeah, the Wind Raider. Oh my God, I tried so hard to make that happen when I was there and just got the door into my face. So when I saw that, I was like, you got to be kidding me. It's Xbox Castle Grayskull all over again. But go on.
I was at like a used vintage kind of toy store up by Lindsay, and they had them there, and I was like, oh, and I looked at, and they were $25 to buy them. I was like, oh, that's. But then I bought from the same store a vintage battle ram for $15. And I was like, that's crazy to me that I can get the real thing, the real nostalgic thing, for less than I can get for this Hot Wheels version of it.
Yep. Yeah, Hot Wheels is doing some really, like I said, we don't follow Hot Wheels, but like, so once that came out, then I started, Googling and Amazoning and realized it's part of a whole Screen Time line, and they've done everything from like the Flintstones car to Spider-Man's car from the 80s, and like, oh, those are like actually some really cool things. And I saw that they did a hoverboard, which is like in scale, I guess, to a Hot Wheels car.
Okay.
Which is like, I guess, sort of like almost in scale for a 6-inch figure.
Right.
And it's like, it's $300 on eBay, Amazon. I was like, whoa, that's craziness. And like, so like, it's cool that they're expanding into stuff like that because that actually, but they're not advertising to you and me. And I think like if they had advertised when this came out, I would have ordered it right away, like from Amazon or something. And it's a fluke. It sounds like we both just happened to stumble on it.
Yeah, no, I was at the dollar store getting supplies for work, like at the office supplies, and just walked through like the dollar store.
Yeah, and I didn't even think it was the X-Jet. I'm like, they probably just did like a stealth ship.
Right.
Because the Hot Wheels does, it's funny, Hot Wheels actually does that all the time. When I started in Hot Wheels, my first year, which was 2005, the big Christmas set that year was a Gorilla Escape. Like, giant mountain with a gorilla on top, and you had to, gorilla's claws or whatever, mechanical. And the reason they did that is because King Kong was in the theaters.
Yes.
And there was no reason they needed to get the King Kong license when they could just make Gorilla Escape, because any kid who buys this is just going to pretend that's King Kong, and they don't need, there's no reason to pay for the license. And they do that all. That's not underhanded. That's just smart.
Well, the last Hot Wheels that I bought before this one was in like 2010, and it was an AMC Javelin. So like just like a weird car, but it had the exact paint job as the yellow police cars from the first Mad Max movie. And didn't say anything about Mad Max, didn't say anything. It just said police car, AMC Javelin police car. And I was like, I need to have that. That's incredible.
Yep. They did. That's an interesting, legal, totally legit way of working around licenses.
Yeah.
Which is fun.
And I think they can be hidden in plain sight because the Hot Wheels wall is so huge and there's so much input in your coming into your brain, right? Like things hide in plain sight sometimes.
And that's why my first instinct was, oh, they just did a stealth plane.
Yeah.
But it's clearly kind of supposed to be the Blackbird. And I'm like, I wonder if I bought that, if I could like put that on my X-Men shelf and it would feel, And then when I saw, of course, that it actually was the Blackbird, I'm like, done, 99 cents, no problem. The only other Hot Wheel I bought in the last few years, I bought Rick and Morty's spaceship.
Right.
Same thing. It's like, but they've never advertised this to me. I just had to stumble upon it.
They even did some Enterprises a couple of years ago.
Yes, I saw that when I was researching the whole screen time. I was like, oh my God, they've done, like, why are they not advertising to the sci-fi nerd figure? Right. Because those are the ships that we would, or the cars, the vehicles, whatever, that we would buy. We don't necessarily buy, I'm trying to remember the name of their standard cars, the Bone Crusher, whatever, the thousands of, they do 400 new cars a year. And they're for kids, and they're for Hot Wheels collectors, which are also dying off, which is an interesting phenomenon.
And they're cheap enough to just buy your kid without thinking about it.
They're what's called a shut me up gift.
Right.
You're in the store, you need your kid to behave. Here, if I buy you a 99-cent Hot Wheel, that was actually why when I was at Jada, when we created the Jada Nano figures.
Right.
My pitch to that, when I went to the president of Jada, I brought in my old Kenner Star Wars metal figures. And I said, why don't we do this with everybody in pop culture? Everyone thinks of metal soldiers as like, the Civil War, World War II, whatever. No one's ever done that with Marvel, DC, Harry Potter, we really tried to get Game of Thrones back before the season finale destroyed the brand. And it's amazing how quickly that brand fell.
That dropped off hard.
Everybody wanted to be part of Game of Thrones and get their license.
Yeah.
Then the finale happened, and everyone just slowly walked out of the room. This brand just went from being super hot to the worst thing ever. But the point being is, so the way I pitched this was, and we can basically create a figure line that will compete against Hot Wheels. Right. 99-cent action figure. Yes, it's not articulated, but it looks awesome. And we launched it like a huge end cap at Walmart. It did great.
Yeah. No, I've bought a lot of those for my kids in their stockings.
Well, there you go. And I thank you for that, even though I don't get a royalty. It's like
but they were small. They were cool. You guys even did a wrestling line. My son was super into wrestling at the time, so we did all of those.
Honestly, that was the hardest part about leaving Jada, was because I created that line. It was 100% my idea. I'm not putting myself on a pedestal. I'm just saying factually.
Just the facts.
And it did so well so quickly, but it was an hour and a half commute each way. And that was a lot of driving in LA traffic. The big reason I'm now in North Carolina, Greensboro, because we just realized we need a better quality. We were paying so much money for a tiny, tiny apartment. Now I live in a 5-bedroom house with a yard that cost a third of what I was paying for a tiny apartment with no yard. LA is just falling off the cliff, but that's not my problem. That's LA's problem. Anyway, yeah, this I honestly really didn't want if Jada was 5 minutes from my house, I would have never left.
Right.
It was I loved working there. I loved that they were it would have a small toy company is like a speedboat and a Mattel Hasbro is like an aircraft carrier. So, it takes hours to turn an aircraft carrier around, but you can turn it on a speedboat in about a minute. And that's the advantage of being a small toy company, is like we got those to market in like 6 months or something ridiculous like that, from like me walking into Jack's office to seeing them at Walmart. And it's also helped that he was Chinese, and like not just like fluent in Chinese, like he is Chinese. So he would fly to China and like meet directly with the factories and like negotiate with them, which is something like most companies can't do. They have to hire like an intermediator.
Yeah.
But you know, if I pitched that to Mattel, it would have taken 3-4 years to make it to market. First, it has to go under testing, and then we have to review it, and then we have to throw it through a spreadsheet and bring kids in and adults in. And like when I did Hot Wheels Star Wars, that was the last line I worked on at Mattel before I left for Jack's, which again, I was not fired. I left because I was recruited away. I can't believe people keep saying that as if it's like a fact. Like if I say it enough, it'll be true.
Right. Well, people know more about you than you do, Scott. That's the reality, right?
It is. Clearly they were there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, every job I've ever gotten is through networking and who I know, which is why
100%.
everyone should sign up for the Leadership and Legacy newsletter from Abby Donnelly. She does an amazing newsletter about networking and how to get jobs, and it's a free newsletter. Everyone go over to Legacy and Leadership and sign up. Okay, so Hot Wheels Star Wars. I have to make a video about this. I just haven't figured out the angle without ripping on Mattel. But basically, they put the character cars for Star Wars. Like, so Darth Vader is like, I forget what it was, like a Lamborghini or something.
Yeah.
They put that through testing 4 times with kids at great expense, because the question they were asking kids was, how will you play with this?
Right.
And every single time, the results that came back were 50% of the kids said, that's Darth Vader's car. He's driving that car.
Right.
The other 50% said, that's Darth Vader as a car, like as if he was transformed into a car by, I don't know, the Force.
Yeah.
Not how the Force works. Greatest and only redeemable line from the sequels. So they basically, like upper management couldn't wrap their head around the idea that there wasn't just one way to play with this toy. They wanted, out of all this testing and spreadsheeting and all that, to come like clearly, oh, this is Darth Vader inside a car, so all of the sets, all of the marketing will be done in that tone. Right. But because there were 2 separate but equal play patterns that came out of it, they couldn't handle it. And it was like, I'm like, just put out the toys, let the kids play with it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how they think, they're going to play with it.
Yeah. And when we were doing there were 2 other things in a similar vein when we were creating the introduction play set for that line, like the track set, if you will. Design came up with like 5 or 6 different concepts. One was like a Battle of Hoth kind of thing, where you're flying under a track going under an AT-AT and like around it. One was a space slug thing where there was I'm sure a Battle of Endor thing. And one of them was racing down a track set towards the Death Star, hitting the Death Star, and the Death Star explodes or falls over or whatever. Yeah. And so I was, the full-on marketing manager of the line. They brought him to me in to give my opinion, just to, not necessarily what it was going to. So I looked at them all, and I said, that one, pointing to the Death Star. I'm like, there's no question that's the one we should do, because that's a race. That is a space race, literally. It's, I mean, that's, if you listen to the Star Wars radio drama, Star Wars is a racing movie. That's really what it is. It's all about getting to the final race, which is the trench run of Luke and Darth Vader racing down the trench together. So they're like, okay, Scott, well, thank you for your opinion. Like, scurry back to your marketing area. And of course, when I left Mattel, and a year later, that was the one that was on shelf. And then the other one, the final one, was when they did back to the character cars, because they did several different types of Star Wars. They did vehicle cars. They did, the Luke, the Tatooine, the X-wing Luke, the car that was going to represent Luke in his pilot gear. Yeah. Was done as a dune buggy because Luke comes from Tatooine. Yeah. And so again, I said, no, like if you're doing Tatooine Luke in his white outfit, that's an awesome dune buggy. Totally get it. Luke in his X-wing gear needs to be a race car.
like a dragster, so it has that nose like an X-wing.
Right, and because it's a race.
Yeah.
I was like here we had like it was interesting to see like them struggling with how to make Star Wars about cars. But I'm like, the whole first movie is a racing movie. Like it's literally building up to a race. And so I said, you need to make it a race car. And I remember like the VP of design was like, okay, back to your marketing cadence. Like, don't tell us how to design things.
Right.
Sure enough, when they sent the designs off to Lucasfilm, they approved every single design except one. The one they didn't approve of, and they said, was X-Wing Luke can't be a dune buggy, needs to be a race car. And I was just like that kind of mentality between like Mattel and or marketing and design at some of the larger companies.
Right.
Like the Jor-El thing, like all of it. It's like, yeah, it just makes your head explode.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to the nostalgia of the catalog look around the holidays, I think it's funny talking to my kids and trying to explain to them that not only was it a catalog that we got and we got to look at and experience, we actually like owned the catalog, and there was some value in owning an image of something.
I mean, that's why I keep all of my old Star Wars reference books.
Right.
Like the internet is great, but like those images could be gone tomorrow.
Right. But and you know, we used to collect, like, remember the movie trading cards that would come out, and you're like, this is how I'm going to see Batman for the first time, and I can look at this picture all day long because there's value in this image. And there's no longer a value in an image for kids. So like I used to always save my card backs and like just meticulously look at the cross sell, because I'm like, I get to own this. I actually used to, the first figure I get from any line, I'd cut out the figures from the back of the cross sell, and I'd have those as like the full line, because usually you get one figure to start, and although it's cool to have He-Man, without Skeletor, there's not a lot for him to do. But if I cut out all the cross sell figures, I could play with little paper figures.
Oh, brilliant!
Right?
Brilliant. Totally.
The whole line right away.
Not to mention like the G.I. Joe file cards and like, and that's how you learned who else was out there.
Yeah.
Collect them all. That's where it comes from. The Superpowers card back. Like.
Exactly. And even I say, like, we used to just, how many hours you'd spend of your life reading the back of a cereal box? Right? Because there's image and there's information, there's stuff going on there, but we're so inundated with video and images coming around. We take so much of it in that we don't, there isn't intrinsic value in owning an image anymore. And I think that's why you're seeing comic books kind of not be in the back of kids' pockets all the time, because they have access to these things. But I remember like getting a puzzle as a kid, being like, when I'm done this, I get to see a picture of Superman, and it's going to be amazing.
And today's kids are like, Google Superman. Like,
right.
Yeah.
And they can see whatever they want to see.
It's the instant delivery. It's the free instant delivery. Everything's streaming.
Yeah.
So you can see the entire series in 3 hours and then walk away. So there's no time for a fan base to be created, because kids just move on to the next thing.
Absolutely.
It's like they binge the CGI Master show. Great. Oh, I like that. What else? Click.
Right.
Versus when we were kids, it was on every weekday, which was also part of the brilliance of how it was done. But you'd meet around. It was like the office water cooler concept. You'd meet around the slide and be like, "Oh my God, did you see what happened on Gem or He-Man or Care Bears or whatever yesterday?"
Yeah. I remember the big thing is when you watch She-Ra, but He-Man would show up.
And like, it was like mind blowing. And
right.
The only way you could watch it is if you sat down at a specific time in front of your TV and consumed it.
Right.
Eventually VCRs came along, blah, 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 blah. But like, now it's just like Netflix, go, boom, next episode, go, boom, go, boom.
Right.
When we're at my father-in-law's house in Jersey, which we're going to next week, he doesn't have anything streaming. He just has regular cable. Works for him. He's 85. And so my daughter's like watching TV. She's like, what's with the commercial? Like, why do they keep stopping it and showing ads?
Yeah.
Like, she's never, like, that's mind blowing to her. She's like, can't I skip the ads? And it's like, my wife and I talk all the time, like, the world, was it just better without the internet? Coming from a guy who runs a YouTube channel. But
there's pros and cons, but the availability of it being always there, we're losing a little bit of like this, like being able to like converse with people and give all my attention to one person because I don't have the world at my fingertips as well, right? So we're constantly competing with the entire knowledge of the world.
Yeah.
When we're talking to people. But yeah, there's this like entitlement to like, I don't need to wait for things. I just want it now. I want to skip the ads. But even that, like, I remember talking about when VCRs first came out, the first thing I used my VCR for was taping good commercials.
Interesting.
You'd see a commercial for like, Superpowers or Masters or G.I. Joe, and I'm like, I want to tape it because I want to be able to watch it whenever I can.
And now we have YouTube, and you could probably watch all those commercials instantly.
Right.
That shouldn't be knocking YouTube because we're on YouTube right now.
No. And it's funny. We did a friends group event, and so like a retreat, and so I was in charge of breakfast. Like, Adam, you're going to be in charge of breakfast. So I just bought a bunch of sugary cereal, and then I downloaded a bunch of episodes of 80s cartoons, but put commercials in them, and watched like a 4-hour block of like cartoons and commercials as we ate our cereal. And everyone was like, the commercials were the best part. That was the most nostalgic part, was watching these commercials that used to get us pumped up for stuff. And so again, it's the idea of like, there was value in seeing it because you never knew when you were going to see it again.
Right. It was fleeting.
Right.
Yeah. It was limited.
And you experienced it.
Yep.
Right. And again, it was like this cultural thing where it's like, did you see the commercial this morning? And they're like, yeah, I saw that. Looks incredible. And so, I remember seeing the commercial for Cyclone, the Motu figure, and just being like, he's knocking everybody over, and like going and talking about it with Jonathan and Scott the next day at school, being like, did you see that figure?
Water cooler right there. That's it. And it's like, yeah, we've lost that. And that's really going to affect, creating fans of anything.
Yeah.
Like kids, even I'm going to have to actually run in a few minutes.
Yeah.
Because I got to be a parent downstairs. My daughter was saying like, oh, fidgets are so last year and unicorns are so 2 years ago. And it's like, 2 years ago she was so into unicorns, and then last so into fidgets, poppets or whatever. And it's like the fads are like being born and dying so quickly now. Like, how it's interesting the way that's going to affect the toy industry, the culture, their own, mental health. Like,
yeah. We've done our best to raise our kids to be toy kids, and I think the key of that is being like, let's lay on the floor and play with them, right? At every age, and really not pushing them out of that too soon. Like, I'm not hurrying them to grow up, because I want my kids to be kids as long as they possibly can. Right?
Yeah.
Just embrace it.
My daughter's 11 going on 18. Like,
I know but my son, and this is not just to pump your tires, but his catalog, like his wish book for the last year, has been your channel. So his Christmas list this year is like, I want a DCU Classics this guy, I want a Motu Classics this guy. So I'm like, where am I going to find this stuff? So we're scouring all kinds of sites and whatnot. But when the world's open to them, right, you can be a fan of anything for as little or as long as you want. And there isn't this collective groupthink anymore. That was like kind of cool though as a kid. Like, if you didn't have Castle Grayskull as a kid, where were you? Get on board here.
Yeah. Like, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong with your parents? Like,
I remember my friend across the road and I were both really into wrestling figures as a kid, but we would buy opposites of each other so we could have one bigger collection. Right.
I don't think, like, my best friend growing up in Connecticut, Sean, we didn't do that deliberately, but totally the same thing. Like, he had Merman and Zodak, I had Stratos and Buzz Off. Right. It was very, yeah. And then we bring our sack of stuff over, dump it all on the floor, and we had subconsciously, but yeah, same thing. Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
So, well, anyways, this has been great. I thank you for your time, Scott. It's always a pleasure to sit down and chat, and we should do it again very soon.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's like a great way to start a Saturday. Like, I love it. And sorry for all the mix-ups with scheduling.
Oh, no, we got to work on our communications here.
Yeah, but it's good, and we got to talk about Times Square.
Times Square heroes. So
yeah, have to have it.
The artwork that I sent you, for those who watched our last video, there's a thing happening. So that guy who did the artwork is my buddy Chris, and so he's like sold out on it. So we have some people that want to be involved in like pushing this thing forward. So we got to talk about what that looks like.
All right, let me circle back with you on email on this one, because like, yeah, we should. I think it would be so funny if this was like birthed from like these podcast talks, and it's such a great story.
Absolutely, it would be great in a bunch of levels.
All right, I owe you that, like, in my inbox and like have to get to, and like client and schoolwork. I'm burning the candle like 9 ends right now.
Right.
Anyway, not important. It was great to talk to you. I will go
Absolutely.
back on that. We'll talk about everything. Why don't let's do this again after the new year. And man, wish you happy holidays.
Same to you, my friend. You and your family just have the best one.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. It was great to talk.
Absolutely.
All right.